Hey, let me start with something that should not be controversial, but somehow is. Compassion is not chaos. Compassion is not confusion. And compassion is not the absence of limits. As one of these kids who grew up um, kind of Gen X, I'm in a Gen X boomer thing. Some of our kids think that our parents didn't love us or have compassion for us because in the summertime, yeah, you get on your bike and 9 o'clock in the morning, you were gone and nobody knew where you were all day long. But we did have a limit. We did have borders. It was the porch light or it was the street light. That was our border. And that was our rules. And that was our lack of confusion. There was no confusion about it. Be home before the light came on. We didn't get to just cruise on our bikes at 11:30 at night. Hey, I'm here. Where's my dinner? Yeah, because keeping teeth in your head was a goal, right? But so real compassion did have borders, and we had borders, and we had limits, and there was not confusion, and there was not chaos. Now I know some people just recoiled because for years we've been told that borders are cruel. Enforcement is heartless, and we're seeing this on TV. Enforcement is heartless, and saying no is somehow immoral. But here's the problem with that story: it collapses the nanosecond it touches reality. Because in the real world, the one that we live in here, compassion without borders doesn't help people. It actually chews them up. If we can, let's talk honestly. A country without borders is not compassionate. It's reckless. And if you have a reckless system, it always hurts the weakest of us first. Because we've been sold this idea that unlimited entry equals unlimited kindness. That if we just open the gates wide enough, that somehow suffering magically disappears. I just ended a 2-week production of Ragtime, where I play Booker T. Washington. All right. Yeah, I know Booker T didn't have a beard, but what the heck? I played him with a beard. Anyway, he would have wanted a beard if he might have grown one. Anyway, and it deals with that point of time in 1906 where immigration was just incredible. It was off the chain. And it simply overwhelmed whatever systems were there. And there were very few systems set up for immigrants. Very few. There were hardly any systems set up for poor people who were already here, let alone the massive immigration that happened during that time period. And what it led to was horrific suffering and horrific poverty and horrific cruelty. There was no magical disappearance of suffering. But that's not how human systems work. That's not how government works. And it's definitely not how families work. Every functioning system Every single one has boundaries. Your house got doors. Your wallet got limits. I don't know about your wallet, but my wallet got limits. Your body has an immune system. And somehow, when it comes to a nation, we're told boundaries are somehow immoral. It's not compassion. It's ideology dressed up as virtue. So here's where the conversation gets ouchy, gets uncomfortable. Because the people cheering loudest for open borders are rarely the ones dealing with the consequences. And we saw this here recently. We saw this here this year, um, where there were people in places like Martha's Vineyard who were declaring themselves a sanctuary city because they could. Well, they were doing that until they had to. A busload, 50 illegal immigrants was dropped off in Martha's Vineyard. Vineyard, those folks declared a humanitarian emergency. 50 people around people who have a lot of resources, a lot of money. Those are the people who are screaming, we should let people in because Ellis Island, and they go on and on and on because they don't have to deal with the consequences. The people who pay, not just in money, but in resources and the um, the 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 uh, the difficulty of getting to resources and schools and all those things are the working poor because their wages are now undercut. Kids in overcrowded classrooms, patients in overwhelmed ERs. The community's told to figure it out, especially out on the border, without resources or consent. And no, this is not theoretical. When local services collapse, it's not wealthy activists standing in line. If you know ragtime, when systems collapse on the Lower East Side, it's not, the wealthy in wealthy areas that are standing in line. It's already the people who are living paycheck to paycheck. Open border policies don't punish the rich. They tax the poor in so many ways in chaos. Now, let's talk about the biggest lie of all, the lie told to the immigrants themselves. And this is where, as I was getting to know and becoming one with the musical ragtime, this is one that kept banging me in the head. The lie that's told to the immigrants themselves. They are promised opportunity. They are promised safety. They were promised a nation or a system that can absorb them. But what they're handed instead is this: overcrowded shelters, years long legal limbo, exploitation by employers, and too often exploitation by straight up criminals. That's not compassion. When you remove borders, you don't remove suffering, you export it. The cartels don't disappear. The human trafficking doesn't stop. The journey doesn't get safer. It gets deadlier. And here's the part that you won't hear from politicians. You cannot be generous with resources that you don't control. You cannot help people. You can't track. You don't know where they are. You cannot protect human dignity in a system that is collapsing. Order must come first. Then compassion follows, not the other way around. When I started teaching and I was figuring out how to do this, it didn't matter how much I cared for the kids. It didn't matter how much my heart went out to them. It didn't matter how much I understood their socioeconomic situation. It didn't matter that these kids were living in the same houses, in the same neighborhood, on the same streets that I grew up on. But if I couldn't get them to sit in a damn chair and shut up for 5 minutes at a time, I could not help them. I could not teach them. The order has to come first. It was the only way. And then I could pour my compassion onto them by helping them with their, with their education, with anything else that came up. Like a lot of teachers, we bought a lot of lunches. A lot of lunches. Right? So a secure border doesn't mean no immigration. It means legal immigration. It means international immigration. And most importantly, it means humane immigration that actually works. Chaos doesn't help anybody, except for the people profiting from it. All right, let me be blunt here. A movement that refuses to say no is not compassionate. A movement that refuses to say no is not compassionate. It's cowardly. Because saying no requires responsibility. It requires prioritization, requires leadership. Saying yes to everyone feels good in a speech. You remember the movie with what's his face who plays God, and Morgan Freeman says, "Hey, you can be God," and all the prayer requests are coming in, and he just gets on AOL, Jim Carrey, and then he just says yes to everything. Remember that? What happened? Chaos. Absolute chaos. Saying yes, it feels good it feels good in a speech, but it collapses the moment real people show up. And when it collapses, the same politicians who demanded open borders suddenly disappear. They don't take responsibility. They don't live for the consequences. They just move on to the next slogan. Now this is hard for people. This is hard for especially for kids that are being taught now. A nation is not just a piece of dirt. It's not just a piece of land. It's a shared agreement. We talked about this on another series that we've done. It talks about civic nationalism. Borders are how citizens consent to who enters, under what conditions, how resources are shared. If you remove the borders, you remove the consent. And when consent disappears, trust trust follows right behind it. And that's how societies fracture. Here's what real compassion looks like. I want to write these down. Enforcing the law humanely and consistently. Ending incentives for very dangerous journeys. Fixing asylum so it's fast, it's fair. Prioritizing those who follow the rules. If you follow the rules, yeah, you get to, yes. Protecting citizens and migrants from the chaos. from being trapped in a box, locked in a box truck in the middle of the desert because some coyote ran off and people died. It happens. And it's happened more than once. And if it happened only once, it would be too many times. So protecting citizens and migrants from that level of chaos, that's not cruelty. That's adulthood. Compassion without borders is emotional. Compassion with borders is effective. All right, so I'm going to leave you with this. If you cannot control entry, then you can't guarantee safety. And if you can't guarantee safety, you cannot claim compassion. Because compassion without borders is just chaos with a smile. And Americans are tired of being told that exhaustion is progress.